So I know where Shane's coming from because I also had to write my material down as well. 2 weeks to flatten the curve, and here we are 3 years later, and we are still under government suppression. The rhetoric coming from mainstream media had us believing that COVID was going to be like a Stephen King novel. The hospital was going to be overrun, busy, body bags, and so on and so on. During the last 3 years, we have gone through 4 forced lockdowns, mandatory testing, and COVID shots. Some were okay with this government enforcement, and others were not. The issue was that we were not given the choice. For me, things started not to make sense when my children went back to school after the 3rd lockdown. They were in grades 6 and 7. They were not allowed to play in the schoolyard together. Each grade had to stay in their chalk box out in the field, but at the end of each day, they got into the yellow tube with 5 other schools. So the yellow tube is my children's school bus, and in that bus there was 3 to 5 different schools riding that bus together. And maybe their classmates, maybe they were in North Bay for hockey, maybe they were in Toronto for baseball, or another city for other events, and they all congregate back into that tube. So that's when things for me just started, they didn't make sense, the segregation and whatnot. Another light bulb moment for me went off. I also worked at a after school program, and in our program we had children in there whose parents were doctors and nurses and professionals. And what really didn't make sense to me was, if you're a doctor or a nurse or a professional making a lot of money, and it's a Stephen King show in the hospital, an absolute nightmare, why would you send your kids to mainstream school when you make enough money? You could hire your own private teacher and have them taught out of your own home. So things just weren't adding up for me, and things were coming true. Like Michelle said, all I wanted to do was work my 12 hours, weekends with my family, pay my taxes, and to be left alone. The Trudeau government has discriminated against our Indigenous people. Mr. Socks was out surfing during this annual event. He's discriminated against the like-minded people, discriminated against the truckers, they discriminated against the church, our nurses who went from heroes to zeros, the OPP. The OPP had a 71-page contingency plan that they handed the government, and they were seeing that the events in Ottawa, people were starting to go home, people were starting to go back to their families. The OPP handed this 71 contingency plan to Justin, and he refused to even look at it. He was just excited to implement his Emergencies Act. What happened to monkeypox? Right? Trudeau was trying to tell us that gay man-on-man interaction was the cause of monkeypox. And then one of the more disturbing things that has come out is the MAID program. So we have our veterans, we have mentally ill people, physical abilities, the poor. So these folks and many other people are being offered medically assisted in dying. So instead of helping somebody out with PTSD, they offer them to pretty much be euthanized. What is the main goal there? I honestly believe the main goal is they want them off their bankroll. And heaven forbid you discriminate against our farmers. As Shane was saying, I don't really need to touch much on this, but our farmers are some of the most intelligent people out there. They're doing things out there that it's mind-blowing. And you want to control their fertilizer use? Farmers don't even want to use a lot of fertilizer if they can help it. But that is still infringing on more people's rights. We saw Biden, he's trying it again. He's trying to discriminate against our gun owners and farmers. Michelle brought this up about Alberta. People are told to leave their houses, and apparently the RCMP is going into these homes and taking the firearms and the ammunition from these people. not to mention the division of family. This summer will be 2 years. Every summer, our two daughters, they would go to Kingston, and they would spend 7 to 10 days with my father in Kingston. My nieces live with them, and my daughters have a great relationship with their cousins. And it was getting close 2 years ago, and my daughter came to me and she said, "Papa is saying something's wrong with Papa. He's saying some things that just aren't right." So I called my dad up and I said, "The girls are excited about coming to visit, and they're excited for their visit in July." And my dad says to me, "Are you and Janice vaccinated?" And I said, "No, Dad, everything's okay. Everybody's good here. You know, we're healthy. Everything's fine." And he said, "Are you getting your girls vaccinated?" And I was like, "Again, no, Dad. Everything's good. You know, everybody's healthy. Well, the family's good. Everything's fine." And his last words to me were, "No vax, no visit." And he has not yet to pick up the phone when I've called. I took the high road. I said, "Okay, Dad, you know, I respect that. That's your house." I call on Father's Day, Christmas, Easter. I call out of the blue. We had a really great relationship. When I would phone him in the past, he would pick up the phone within the third to fourth ring. And so it'll be 2 years now, and he won't reach out when I reach out. So it's pretty tough. And then we were not alone. So my wife and I, we live in Huntsville, and we started digging into the information. We could see that we've all been duped and just feeling really low. And when we saw what was happening in Ottawa and the truckers and the freedom movement, I remember my lifelong friend laughing at me on the phone, and it was on the first Friday night. And he's like, "Oh, I've been on all the cameras along the highway. There's nothing there. I don't see any trucks. I don't see lots of cars heading toward Ottawa." And I said to him, "Well, I think there is. I've been catching something. I've been catching this movement, and I think it's going to be pretty big." And he went on to say, "No, I think you're wrong, Jason. You know, I don't think it's what you think it is." And we have been friends for over 40 years, and I pretty much told him to go, you know what, with his hat. So then the weekend happened, and I had to pick up the phone on Sunday night. And I phoned my friend up and I said, "So, all those trucks, all those people, you didn't think it was actually going to happen?" And I reiterated what he could do with his hat again, and I haven't talked to that guy since. So one afternoon, Janice and I, we had heard something about what was happening in Muskoka, and we were traveling back on Highway 11 from down south. And we're coming around the one corner, and Janice grabbed my arm, and I looked over on the other side of the highway, and there was the first time we had seen the Muskoka convoy movement. And we both actually started welling up because we thought we were alone, and we didn't know how many more people were out there that, you know, had the same feelings as us. And we found the nearest exit, and we did a U-turn, and we jumped in on the back of that convoy, and we went through some of the smaller areas and communities in Muskoka, and we finally stopped at a parking lot. Ever since I met those people are now my friends and my family. Those people showed me their true colors, and those people have been for me through some of the darkest times that I've had to go through over the last couple of years. The fourth lockdown for me was very difficult. My kids were at school. My wife has always been working throughout all the lockdowns. There would be mornings where it'd be 10:30 in the morning, and the house is empty and the house is quiet. I'm by myself, and I'd venture into the kitchen, and my hand would go on the refrigerator door, and I'd say to myself, "You really want to do this at 10:30 in the morning?" And sometimes, some days I was able to win that battle, and then other days by noon, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I look over my shoulder and there'd be 5, 6, 7 empties sitting on the table. And then I'd go the opposite way sometimes, and I'd wake up around noon and the house is quiet, and I would just roll over and say, Jason, you can do better than that. Let's make it 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then maybe we'll think about getting up. So my life, this is where I realized I made a mistake, and I identified as Jason from the pool. I identified as Jason from the after school program. And when you identify like that, they take it away from you. It was devastating for me. And I was never like that. I was always a happy-go-lucky, upbeat kind of person, always on my toes, loved life. So yeah, when that was all taken away from me, I fell into depression, anxiety, drinking heavily by myself. I'm very, very blessed. I have a wonderful partner, my wife. I've got two great girls. They helped me they kicked my butt, and they've been there for me the whole time. And I'm not sure if I would have been here if it wasn't for them. Yep, and I love them to pieces for that, for keeping me. So when I did return to work after the 4th lockdown, people would come into the community center and they'd be like, "Oh, Jason, it's so good to see you. Are you glad to be back to work?" I said, "Well, actually, I'm emotionally uninvested." And they said to me, "Well, what's that supposed to mean?" I said, it's like when you're dating your high school sweetheart and they dump you 4 times in a row, but you keep on going back." So, like Michelle said today, presently, I identify as a husband, father, a friend, and because all the evil in the world constantly in our face, I could feel my heart turning black. People reached out, and just before Christmas, I started going to church, and I have continued to start that journey with Jesus Christ. Thank you.
Woo!